Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to have you all here today. My name is Denise Lucy, and I'm professor and executive director of the Institute for Leadership Studies at Dominican University of California. We are in San Rafael, California. We have several of you from all around the country. We are pleased to have you here to learn more about our program called Thrive in the AI Era, Unleashing the Power of Human Connection and Creativity. And we're thrilled that you're joining us. Our Business Edge Briefing is a program that we've held at Dominican University with our terrific partner, the North Bay Leadership Council. And we have partnered since 2010 offering this series. This is our 164th program that we've had. And together we've welcomed business owners and organizational leaders to share business strategies and techniques to be competitive and resilient in both domestic and global marketplaces. Our goals for these briefings are to ignite innovation, inspire creativity, and increase profits and productivity. Our speakers are engaging and recognized experts in business who inspire us to thrive in good times and bad. And I'd like to thank you, Cynthia Murray, our retired CEO and president of the North Bay Leadership Council, who co-founded this program with us. It's just so exciting. We continue to be partners all these many years. And Cynthia is going to join us, and she's going to manage the Q&A, and you'll meet her soon. We'd also like to thank our community partner, the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber is one of Marin County's leading business advocates and provides resources, relationships, and results for all of our members. Thank you so much, San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, for all these years of being our partner. We'd also like to thank our partners on campus at Dominican University in our business school, the Borowski School of Business, the U.S. Commercial Service, which is the lead trade promotion agency of the U.S. government. Its trade professionals provide counseling and support to help U.S. companies increase sales to new global markets. And it's been over a 20-year partnership that we've helped businesses with the U.S. Commercial Service on our campus. Marin Small Business Development Center, the SBDC, is also in our business school, and they offer expertise to provide no-cost business advising to small businesses in many areas, including e-commerce and social media setup, pivoting strategies, and HR support, and much more. So please call upon us. We'll connect you to both the SBDC and the U.S. Commercial Service. Cynthia, we'd love to have you come forward and introduce our presenter now and moderate the Q&A later. And
thank you so much, Dr. Lucy, and thank you all for joining us today. We have a very exciting presentation coming up. First, I want to tell you a little bit about North Bay Leadership Council. It is an employer-led public policy advocacy organization representing the leading employers in Marin, Sonoma, and Napa counties here in the North Bay of California. We do a lot of work around issues of interest to employers like housing, economic vitality, transportation, those kinds of things. And I hope if you have any interest, you'll check us out on our website. Today, our presenter is Robin Beers. She's the founder of Ubuntu. It is Ubuntu Culture Company, which helps organizations to create aligned, resilient cultures and innovative, successful strategies. Robin is the organizational psychologist, human-centered design leader, and committed equity advocate. For more than 25 years, she has worked to catalyze transformation for organizations, their employees, and their customers. Prior to founding Ubuntu Culture Company, Robin spent 18 years at Wells Fargo creating digital customer experiences by applying human-centered design culture and practices. Robin holds a doctorate in organizational psychology and a master's in African American studies. She also teaches at Dominican's Institute of Leadership Studies in their Leadership Academy. I want to let you know that after Robin's presentation, we will be taking questions, so please put your questions into the Q&A section so we can answer as many as time allows. We will also be sharing Robin's slides after the presentation today. Please join me in welcoming Robin Beers. Hi, Robin.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, Cynthia. And it's an honor to be with you all today. Thanks to everybody who's taken time out of your busy lives to attend this presentation. And I'm going to get into it. Hold on. Let me get into slideshow mode here. So we already did introductions. One other thing you should know is that I'm an avid dancer. So let me know if you want to dance with me sometime. Before we get started into the heart of how to thrive in the AI era, I just want to give a bit of context about why I named my company Ubuntu Culture Company. Ubuntu is a South African Zulu word meaning humanness, and it represents a universal concept of oneness and interdependence with all living things. And so according to this philosophy, we can really only realize our full humanity through our relationships with others. And so in business, cultivating Ubuntu fosters collaboration and co-creation of regenerative, life-affirming solutions in ecosystems of dignity and trust. And so what I'm doing here is I'm intentionally pointing to the fact that Ubuntu stands in contrast with the American ethos of rugged individualism. Because as we know from our own intuition, and even quantum physics tells us, that all of life and everything is interconnected. So as the world becomes more complex, recognizing this interconnectedness is more and more critical. So let's get into it. So these days, you cannot take a breath, which I recommend you do right now. Just take a breath without encountering stories and speculation about how AI will change the way we work, the kind of jobs we have, the kind of jobs we will no longer have, and really even fundamentally how we will relate to one another and how our brains will work. So on the one hand, there are a lot of AI pessimists, there are a lot of AI optimists, and there's a lot of noise out there. These are complex, enormously promising, clearly overhyped sets of technologies. And I'm not here to take a position of either an optimist or a pessimist. I do deeply believe that we need to prepare and be curious and involved in the future that is emerging. So let's get into my favorite technologies, which are not anything to do with AI. So I recently started a Substack called The Soft Stuff is the Hard Stuff, and you can follow me there. But you know, my favorite technologies, and we're going to discuss each in turn, care, connect, and create, are really data-backed in the organizational development and leadership literature as the fundamental foundations and building blocks of creating thriving organizational environments. So this is a bit of, these are a lot of facts here, and I'm not going to read them out, but one that is stunning is under employee engagement. Only about 1/3 of employees are engaged in their jobs. This is worldwide, and 18% are actively disengaged. Engaged employees show 21% higher productivity and 24% lower turnover than their disengaged counterparts. So there's a very, fundamental bottom line impact that is related to employee engagement. Going down to complexity navigation, teams with higher high psychological safety experience 40% fewer errors and demonstrate greater resilience. And then in terms of leadership capabilities, hopping up, a manager who demonstrates empathy results in employees that are 4 times more likely to stay and 50% more productive in their work. So this tells you that truly the soft stuff is the hard stuff and should not be dismissed, because it is a strategic imperative for organizations to cultivate these skills. So just for 1 hour, let's turn down the tech noise and tune in to human superpowers, because these superpowers drive productivity, loyalty, resilience, and innovation, ensuring that our organizations can thrive in an increasingly complex world. So these are the fundamental building blocks of your organization's culture. And activating these behaviors will really mark the difference between teams and companies, organizations that are primed to collaborate, innovate, and adapt, and those that are not. And as you can see from this Venn diagram, who doesn't love a Venn diagram, all of these qualities are intertwined. And so we begin with care. So I think we can all agree and recognize that our world feels a bit topsy-turvy. And I know this is true for me personally and in business. And so when I came across this report earlier this year from McKinsey, and they dubbed this the era of perpetual organizational upheaval, I said, oh, yes, that resonates with me. And upon further research, I've also learned this new acronym. Now, a lot of you probably are familiar with the acronym VUCA: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This is a new acronym for the era of perpetual upheaval, and it was coined by futurist Jamais Cascio. And he has some great articles on Medium. He's a futurist with the Institute for the Future, which is in Palo Alto. And he was noticing in his work as a futurist that VUCA just really didn't adequately encapsulate the tremendous rapid changes that our world is experiencing. And everybody has an era, an age that they're dubbing, and he dubs the time we're living in now as the age of chaos. So unlike VUCA, Bonnie emphasizes that we're not just dealing with instability, we're dealing with a reality that actively resists understanding. So if you look at this pictorial collage here, you can see, some representations of the upheaval, unrest, the change that we've all been navigating for the last quarter of a century plus. This quote from Tom Chi, he is the former head of Google X Labs. This has really acted as a guiding light for me in these times of great change and for a lot of the groups that I've worked with. Knowing is the enemy of learning, and learning is among the few things that we can control. And I've been obsessed with learning and learning organizations for a long time. And I wrote my dissertation on organizational learning, in fact, 25 years ago. And there has been no less importance placed on the criticality of the ability for people, teams, organizations to learn together. This is an image of how a lot of us are working today in multifunctional teams, collaboratively, learning our way into solutions by discovery activities, prototyping, testing, trying to pull the future toward us when we don't really know what that future will entail. So as I said, 25 years ago, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on what factors inhibit or enable organizational learning on teams. And I will pause here to say that one of the things that I wish that we had 25 years ago was the ability to have automatic transcription, because I swear to God, this could have cut off at least a year of my time actively working on transcribing my dissertation interviews. But you will see here from this 2x2 matrix of my findings that, to my surprise, my data revealed that CARE, an organization characterized by high care qualities, is the foundation of learning on teams. High care environment, all of these positive activities and behaviors could come alive. In low care environments, learning was constricted by competition and rigidity. And this was, really eye-opening and formed a lot of how I went about leading and developing teams in my corporate career. So what I will say is that the qualities and behaviors of demonstrating care opens up worlds, your own world and the people that you interact with. So my 100% free data-backed advice to you, if you are a leader, and to everyone, because we're all leaders in some realm of our lives, is if you want to spark innovation and collaboration, cultivate a culture of care. And so we do this by practicing inclusion, encouraging belonging. This is a core human need, to feel seen, to be heard, to feel appreciated, and creating environments of psychological safety. To innovate requires experimentation, failure, learning, and it needs to be okay to not know and to reward learning in and of itself. And then finally, honoring humanness. We recognize that employees are real people with lives, interests, and the need to connect. And we make space for sharing and good humor. Fun fact, humor was shown as a marker of high quality work on multidisciplinary teams.
Robin, excuse me, you have the Windows bar in the bottom of your presentation, and there's some concern it may be blocking some of the presentation. I don't know if it's possible for you to get that off your screen, but there you go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Sorry about that. I don't even know how I got rid of it, so hopefully it won't come back. So there are many ways to think about our next human capability or superpower. And we can think about connection as including the relational extension of care. But for our purposes here today, I'm using the human ability to connect in the context of systems thinking, the ability to see relationships, patterns, and interconnections. So thinking in systems is a skill that we can learn. A lot of us are very skilled at analytical thinking, which is about taking things apart. And we became very good at this through our industrial era training. But systems thinking is synthetic. It's about putting the pieces back together and seeing wholes. And we need synthetic systems thinking skills in an interconnected, complex, global world. So this is a depiction on how I spent a lot of my corporate career helping companies become more customer-centric, measuring satisfaction, identifying where we could improve, designing digital services that were usable. And here is a depiction of some paper prototyping concept testing. But human-centered design at the individual level is no longer adequate for a world where we are living in, where technology intersects with nearly every part of our lives. So take wayfinding apps as an example of how we need to shift from human-centered to life-centered design. So, we all use Google Maps, Waze, Apple Maps as our way to both find out where we're going, but also to move us from point A to B as fast as possible. This is human-centered. It takes the human and the technology and says, here, let me optimize this experience for you and you alone. But the unintended consequence of this capability or this technology can be affecting entire towns and neighborhoods. So this photo on the right it's taken from a newspaper of a street in a town in New Jersey. And this little neighborhood, which was typically a quiet, residential, traffic-free neighborhood, started to become overrun with traffic as these wayfinding apps maximized for the individual user, started routing people through this residential neighborhood in ways that urban planners had never imagined or intended. So it was optimized for the driver, but to the detriment of the system, the community. And this is not life-centered design. The realities of climate change demands that we shift from short-term, limitless growth, economic mindsets to mindsets that are rooted in the reality of living on a planet with finite resources. Kate Raworth, she's an economist, and she gives us a new way to think about innovation and growth in a way that connects and balances meeting basic social needs. So you see those in this inner center ring of this donut economics model, with respecting planetary boundaries, the outer ring, to ensure sustainable and equitable development. This is a different way of thinking about how to pursue innovation and the limitations of growth. So the traditional question within innovation activities has been, how might we? But from a regenerative systems view of life, we must also add the question, and at what cost? So finally, we move on to the human technology of our ability to create, or creativity. Humans have been coming up with new ideas to adapt to our environment since humans existed. Creativity is part of our human DNA, and we are hardwired to create and contribute. So, in the workplace, creativity manifests in large-scale innovations, the shiny new thing, the disruptors, and everyday problem solving, like, hey, let's try a different way of doing this, or a different way to run these meetings. Creativity thrives on unpredictability, empathy, and the ability to connect, which we just talked about, disparate ideas. AI can help, certainly, it's a very useful tool, but it cannot fully embody these qualities. So quick story here. I was involved in a project where a leader approached myself and a partner to design a workshop for a group of employees at a huge tech firm that would drive 10x growth. Now, any of you on the call who have been around in tech have heard this, kind of unusual and frankly kind of meaningless metric of 10x growth. And this was really confounding coming from this particular group because this team owned already 94% of the market share in their space. And so we thought, okay, what kind of workshop can we design that will encourage this kind of exponential growth or motivation to even pursue or try to pursue this type of growth? And I kept getting this really sinking feeling in my gut when I would work on these case studies from other tech companies, like, okay, let's look at how this tech company grew or, reignited their growth after a slump. And it just seemed really cruel to subject these employees to an entire day of case studies like this, because I knew that they had been through a really difficult year with multiple layoffs and a lot of fear about losing market share, really to the emergence of AI technology. So I just had a lot of empathy for the people who would be feeling this pressure to work even harder or come up with growth when they didn't know how they would even pursue that. So I'm driving down the road one night with my husband. I'm taking him to the airport, and I had my own creative inspiration moment listening to Beyonce's, her album, specifically her boundary breaking country album, Cowboy Carter. And, I was saying in the car, each album Beyonce releases, it's just like more artistic, more introspective, more boundary breaking than the previous one. She's always expanding her artistry, pushing genre boundaries, combining mediums, and taking artistic risks. So instead of boring case studies, we designed the whole offsite not on other tech companies, which would just probably make people feel bad, but we designed the whole offsite around Beyonce's business principles playbook. And by using our own creativity as organizational consultants, we were thinking outside of the box of a typical case study, and we thereby unleashed our participants' creativity and, more importantly, their enthusiasm, their sense of possibility, and their ability to play. So at one point in the workshop, we could hear people saying, how could we Beyonceify this aspect of our business? So they were enthusiastically asking themselves, what they could do to bring this kind of artistry, inspiration, innovation to improve their own product and their standing in the market. And it was really, really fun. So with that, I want to open up the floor to questions, and I'd be very curious to hear what this evoked for you and how you feel about thinking about these as human, life-centered technologies.
Thank you so much, Robin. As I said, please put your questions into the Q&A section, and we will do our best to answer them as best we can. I think one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking, Robin, is how does this work in intergenerational workplaces? Do you see differences in generations as far as for example, engagement? And one of the stats you talked about, the level of engagement, and I think I've read it's much higher in the United States than maybe some of the stats you gave for the global numbers. And it's also higher perhaps for some of the younger workers as opposed to the older workers. And I just wondered if you have any information on that in your research.
I have not looked at the Gallup data through the lens of generations, and I thought it was actually lower in the United States than globally. I mean, the engagement numbers that I've seen from Gallup, and there was just an email that hit my inbox this week, seems to always be trending downward. And I think it was, maybe at its lowest as people were heading back to the office after pandemic lockdown. But we still haven't fully navigated ourselves into what the future of work looks like there. But in terms of your question about, expectations, they do vary across generations, and I think, that's a topic for a deep dive at another time. But fundamentally, I think these are foundational human qualities, and what I've seen through facilitating hundreds of workshops using methods from design thinking, systems thinking, liberatory design, is that when the conditions are set to use empathy, creativity, and the ability to connect concepts, people really flourish and they relax, because they don't need to come from this sense of, I must know the answer, I'm the expert, I need to defend my point of view. And they can really get into a more generative place where they can do perspective taking, listening to other people's points of view, and combine their knowledge accordingly.
So the next question we have concerns how we deal with connectedness with remote workforces, hybrid workforces. Is that make it more challenging, or have you got any ideas on that?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of leaders who've done a great job of kind of bridging this culture and connectivity gap across hybrid environments. I know a lot of, employers and executives want people to come back to the office because of the cultural dimension. But I know, for instance, when I was at Workday leaders had a great practice of opening up meetings with some play. So, fun facts, asking questions about people's, backgrounds or personal lives, or questions like, what was the worst online purchase you ever made, and how did you resolve it? So things that really brought humanness into the context, whether or not we're on little Zoom boxes or in person.
Getting so many questions. So in a rapidly evolving work environment influenced by AI, what strategies can be implemented to enhance communication and collaboration between human teams and AI systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I am no expert on AI technologies, although that I'm using a lot of them in my work and learning about, the differences between them. And, like a lot of people, I'm finding it really useful, like looking at a blank page when I need to write something. AI, if I type a few prompts into Chat GPT or Claude, can, spit out some ideas that are not necessarily great or finished products, but are enough to sort of unstick my own blockages and get moving. So I'm thinking about, in that context, as, AI as my assistant, my intern, but I think there are bigger challenges. And one of those challenges I've heard about lately is, how do we, in this job market, which is really challenging, apply for positions where our application, our cover letter, our resume is being reviewed by, AI bots, and we, can't seem to break through to a real person. And I think that's really problematic. And I think, traditionally, when we think about like bot enabled customer service, humans are pretty astute at picking up when they're dealing with a machine or dealing with an actual person. And I think that it'll get harder to discern that. But just as, people yell at phone trees of like, agent, agent, people will become frustrated if they feel like they cannot make it through the bot maze and connect with real people. So again, you've got this optimistic lens on the one hand and a pessimistic lens on the other, and it's such early days in terms of how these technologies will be applied, that you can really add up things, equally on both columns.
Following up on that, there's a comment that the eruption of AI means that the content is often suspicious. I never know if the work products I get from a work partner are genuine or just an echo of ChatGPT. It seems that speed has become more important than authenticity or innovation.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that. And I've appreciated, I think my friend Suzanne Howard is on the line, and she's been doing some great writing on Medium about leadership. And I noticed on her most recent post, she had, a note that said, AI was my editor and proofreader for this piece. And so I think those kinds of disclosures will be, one of those markers of trust. And I think, I think that, again, our drive to create, our drive to contribute will continue to supersede sort of the, Starbucksification of content out there, and that we're going to still crave original ideas.
So next question is, how can we ensure that AI technologies augment human empathy and emotional intelligence rather than replace them in a future workplace that relies heavily on automation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to, include human-centered lenses on all of the design of all of these products and technologies, and always be asking the question, what is the human dimension here? And also consequence scanning for, what are the unintended consequences? I mean, speaking of systems thinking, we are operating in systems within systems. And if we, replicate those systems within our AI technologies, we will be replicating a lot of inequality and bias.
One thing that I know I've been concerned about is, garbage in, garbage out. So in the development of AI, it's been primarily male-centered, white male-centered. I think maybe Western culture-centered. How do you play out or enhance the role of cultural intelligence and equity in AI systems so that it can be more beneficial globally?
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert. I have been tuning into articles, around, from say the African continent around, how to include indigenous and non-Western perspectives in these large language models. I think this is an excellent question that I don't really have the answer to.
So one user or attendee wants to know, what AI tools have you begun using, and how do you justify utilizing some of these with dubious legality in how they were developed?
Okay, I'm not sure exactly what the question, what technologies the question asker is referring to specifically in terms of dubious legalities. I would say that am looking at this through the lens of an experimenter. And I've also been, subscribing and paying for services that I think are more trustworthy and more secure. But this is a wild, open frontier at this point, and the opportunity for disinformation is, definitely right.
What are some jobs or functions that you feel like will never be taken over by AI or fall short of the human version of them?
Well, I was listening to a story on the news recently that, or it may have been a podcast, that was talking about how there are so many jobs available in the United States around caretaking. And these, there are not enough people to care for, young children, elderly people. And I don't think that technology, AI, robots or otherwise are going to be able to meet that need. And a different question is, how do we regard those jobs in our economy? A lot of that caretaking work has been feminized and therefore, degraded in terms of its importance and the type of salary it commands. So I think, that's a real factor in, what type of society are we moving from? I know from teaching at Dominican a couple of weeks ago, when the participants in the class who were coming from all different industries and organizations talked about the kind of future that they want, that they really yearn for. They talked about a future with greater empathy and connection and creativity, not less. So if that's really the future that we want, I think we need to ask ourselves, are we designing the technologies we use to enable that or inhibit that?
Next question is, what are your thoughts concerning people who work in current state cultures that are less than optimal and their ability to influence the system towards a culture of connection, care, and creativity?
Yeah, so I think to restate the question, that the questioner is asking, when you're working in a toxic or, low care environment, how do you navigate that, or how can you infuse more care and creativity into the environment? And I think that this is a question that we're all grappling with, is where is our sphere of influence? If we are all embedded within systems, what can we affect? And I know for myself, working in a corporate environment for many years, I established practices and routines and rituals within my team that weren't necessarily instituted by the entire company, but really characterize the type of culture that myself and my leaders were trying to create. So for instance, having a weekly all hands team meeting where people who didn't necessarily get a chance to present or take the floor could sign up to, and were expected to sign up and share their knowledge. And that knowledge could be about the craft of design, but it could also be about a dimension of their diversity that they cared about and they wanted to highlight. And so I think that really it's up to leaders to demonstrate vulnerability, empathy, care within their immediate spheres.
So when will the CARE/no CARE organizational assessment be released?
I love that, Eugene. That's a great idea. And I think that this really is at the heart of organizational culture assessment, right? There are a lot of organizational culture surveys out there. And the question is, are they measuring the right things? I have tended to, because I have a lot of experience with it, I like Gallup's Q12 questions because they focus on, practical, pragmatic things like, do I have the tools to do my work? But also the emotional dimensions of work, like, do I have a close friend at work? Does my manager demonstrate that they care about me as a person? And I think creating those environments and linking them to business outcomes, is a really important endeavor, that these intangible qualities of business life lead to tangible outcomes. And it's really difficult to quantify those things. And I don't even know if personally I want to spend my life force trying to quantify those things, but rather, taking those values at face value and working within environments that also see those values as important.
Another question is, can you share information about advocacy groups and resources to learn more about the Care, Connect, Create model?
Yeah. So the model is, it is a synthesis, my favorite way of thinking, synthetic thinking, of a lot of different research. So my own dissertation research, but also it is inspired by Laura Lee Albin, ALBEN, and the Sea Change Design Institute. And this is a consultancy that practices life-centered design with individuals and groups. And then I would also, recommend getting into sources around systems thinking. So Fritjof Capra is one of the main thinkers and UC Berkeley professor in this area. And as a lot of my friends and colleagues know, I've also been very taken with the ideas in Margaret Wheatley's work, and you can look up her website. There's a lot of free resources there. And she is known for introducing systems thinking models into organizations since the early 90s.
So a person wants to know, what business value do you see in publicly stating one is not using AI?
Yeah, that's interesting. That'll be an interesting stance. I don't know if company, some organizations are taking that stance. I don't think that there is a lot of value in saying, you know, we reject this technology wholesale and the value that it can bring. I mean, I've noticed from just using it as, you know, a proofreading tool that even if I don't take all of its suggestions, it gets me to think about, you know, the construction of my sentences, the quality of my writing. But I think that companies, you know, taking a stance on prioritizing the human dimensions could be an important competitive differentiation. I think, you know, really having a schema of when it's appropriate to use these technologies and when it is alienating for their customers will be important.
Well, you talk about the importance of the human connectedness in the workplace, and I'm wondering if you're seeing in employer hiring or employee reviews, promotions, those things being valued and being sought after qualities that help people get better jobs.
So to restate that, just to make sure I understand, are you saying, you know, that what if these competencies of caring, connecting ideas, and creativity become qualities that organizations are intentionally hiring for?
Hiring and promoting.
And promoting for. I mean, I think, you know, in my professional life that already happens today. And a lot of organizations kind of take a two-prong approach to performance management where they recognize the what, you know, what outcomes has this employee produced, and the how, and how have they done this? Have they done this through, you know, collaboration and relationship building, or through, you know, top down, you know, control and competition? So I think, you know, paying attention to the what and the how is critical. In terms of hiring, I think, you know, I think a lot of great candidates or unconventional candidates may be overlooked because they never actually make it through the AI screening. And I'm definitely concerned about that.
So there's several questioners that are concerned about employee burnout and frustration with trying to make change and to bring these values forward into their workplace. And I think they could use a pep talk.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and that's sort of the story, you know, the point of the story that I told about my client, and thinking about these people who had just, you know, were feeling survivor guilt about you know, surviving multiple rounds of layoffs, but then having to pick up the work of other people. I mean, I think these engagement levels among employees are low because there is fundamentally something amiss, something wrong with the way in which we construct work. And, you know, without getting into a huge conversation about capitalism, a lot of us are working in extractive environments that, you know, ultimately are wanting us to produce without the reciprocity of, you know, safety, security, you know, and rewards. And, you know, I think that is for each of us to ask ourselves, you know, does this position fulfill enough needs for me that I'm willing to do this, or do I need to think about something different? I know for myself, for many years, the answer was yes. And I now have gotten to a point where the answer is no. And that's a scary place to be because it requires reinventing ourselves.
Very true. Person wants to point out that, or ask, did you know that Ubuntu is a popular operating system behind many AI and ML research work?
I do know about the Ubuntu technology, and it's been around for a long time. And I'm sure that they picked up on that because of the conceptual, connotations around interconnectivity. Yes. So somebody is saying, can you please send your Substack link again, this time to everyone? And I actually don't have that option in the drop down in the chat.
Oh,
So
George, can you please do that? It went out just to the panelists.
Yeah, I will send that later because I cannot copy and paste for some reason. I tried to do that, but couldn't.
Okay.
I'm noticing, the models used to train the most popular LLMs are stolen IP. And yeah, I think this idea, of intellectual property being able to be aggregated in these large language models and then used by anything is, problematic. And some organizational theorists and economists are saying, this really marks the end of like expertise, right? And again, I would point us to this idea of, the what versus the how. And this idea in organizational culture and like books like Built to Last is, when people or organizations compete, there are some things that just cannot be copied or cannot be copied well. And I think, true understanding and the ability to communicate authentically and powerfully fall on that side of the how that require, human finesse and abilities.
I really appreciate your presentation, Robin, and I think it's so important that the care, connect, and create is really the human superpower, and what will distinguish us in when we deal with more technology in the workplace, it is what we always will be able to value add and is not replaceable by any technology. So the emphasis on this as we go into a more technologically based and workplace is something that I think we all need to be more aware of and appreciative of. And so your presentation today has really, I think, helped us understand it better and alert us to pay attention to that need to be continuously developed and valued. So thank you so much, Robin. We really appreciate having you with us today. And to close, I just want to also thank our partner, Dr. Denise Lucy. And as promised, we will send out Robin's slides to all the attendees following the webinar. I'd also like to let you know that Dominican University runs various executive education programs, especially designed for North Bay professionals, where experts like Robin teach. For a list of these programs, please visit the link that we're putting into the chat right now and on the screen. And thank you all for coming today. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you again for our next session of Business Edge briefings, which will occur next semester. Thank you all for coming. Thank you again, Robin.
Thank you.